Marcus slammed the report onto the table and cut the fluorescent hum with, "Sign it now, Alex." The sound made laptops tilt and a pen rolled near my hand. I felt suspicion when I saw the missing ledger line and the blanked out amendment note. That suspicion pulled my shoulders tight and kept my mouth closed while everyone else exhaled. The immediate problem was simple and dangerous. A final audit, a looming deadline, and numbers that did not match the paper trail. I moved my thumb over the thin silver wedding band under the table and tried to count breaths. My job kept my family fed. I had a 9-hour commute most days and an ailing toddler who relied on weekend visits. The team had closed 3 other audits this quarter. Claudia Reyes had already run the clock in her voice. The room smelled of coffee and toner. Marcus smelled of bergamot and control. Those facts mattered because they shaped what I could do. Claudia leaned forward and said, "We sign. We explain later if anyone asks." Her voice landed tuned and pragmatic. I saw the folders fan open in front of her, the way her smartwatch gleamed. Her position was plain. Reputation now, problems later. Lena pushed a printed ledger across the table like a hand extended. Her index finger tapped a line. "This entry is flagged. Lena, there are emails attached." They don't match the report. Her eyes were hard in a way that made everyone shuffle papers. The meeting had begun as a forced sign-off. Marcus had set the deadline 15 minutes earlier. The board would be sending a transfer before morning. That was the urgent demand. Marcus had said, "If this goes late, our valuation slides and people notice." "You know what that means?" His tone was smooth and the threat precise. The team closed ranks with small, tired sounds. Claudia nodded at someone, and the someone nodded back. The sound of assent filled the room like a room filling with water. I felt an early shift in me from doubt into a tight-boxed in irritation. Doubt had been curiosity. What was missing and why? The next shift became fear. A private calculation about rent, the toddler, the next performance review. I rubbed the bridge of my nose because in motion I could keep thinking Alex. Marcus, locking his gaze to me. "You sign and we move forward. You don't sign and you make this personal." Choose. His hand rested on his fountain pen as if the pen were a tiny lever. Claudia spoke again, this time slow and precise. "Alex, we need your signature so we can close tonight. This is standard escalation protocol." Marcus approved the adjustments. She used the phrase standard escalation as if the words would dampen the sharp edges of a missing line. Lena pushed another sheet between us. The timestamps on these files don't match the amendment." Someone moved numbers after hours. Her fingers trembled for a half-second, then steadied. She had discovered a thread. That thread could unravel more than just a report. Marcus called a pause and walked to the glass wall. Outside the skyline was a string of office lights and a siren somewhere downtown. He turned back and said, "We keep our client, we keep our people employed. Alex, you are practical. You know what a delay does to junior staff morale. Sign." His voice had the cadence of an appeal and the edge of a warning. Claudia glanced at me the way someone checks a clock. The team wanted closure. I moved my pen twice across the table in small, nervous taps. Actions centered me. Tap, breathe, tap. I felt an internal shift again, resolve collapsing into resignation. "Lena, if you sign this, someone altered the books." "That's not a mistake," Claudia cut in. "Lena, this is not the time to raise hypotheticals." The words came quick and sharp, 3 short exchanges that made the room taste metallic. Their rapid back and forth pushed me toward the signature line. Lena didn't let it go. She pulled up an email chain on her tablet and read aloud. On the 22nd, an instruction came from a corporate address asking for a sweep of departmental accruals. The file shows a timestamp at 1:02 a.m. Marcus' jaw tightened. I watched his hand curl around the pen until the knuckle went white. "That can be explained." "Marcus, clients request guidance. We log adjustments like this every quarter." The phrasing sounded practiced. I stood up because I needed to be physically out of the table's pressure. My knees protested. I hadn't had real sleep in 3 nights. I walked to the window and set both palms flat on the glass. The city lights reflected line by line, and I thought of the toddler asleep in my sister's apartment 2 hours away. The feeling of responsibility shifted in me. Suspicion had opened into a gnawing shame, shame that I might stay silent for comfort. I had to make a decision. Marcus came up behind me and lowered his voice. Alex, privately, sign, and I will recommend you for the next review. Don't sign, and people will remember you for the trouble you cause. You have a family. Think about what you lose. He folded the offer like a business card. He did not mention threats explicitly, but he outlined consequences precisely. He gestured with the fountain pen. The hallway light made a thin line on his cufflinks. I put my hand back on the pen at the end of the table. Everyone's eyes had returned. The room's temperature felt like negotiation. Lena's printed amendment sat between Claudia's leather folder and my laptop. I lifted the amendment and scanned the tiny print. The amendment line had been deleted, the timestamp altered, and a single thumbprint smudge was visible in the corner of the paper, where an ink pad had left a mark. I felt clarity in that small detail, a human mark. My mind reached for motive, we argued. The exchange hardened. Marcus, this is routine. Claudia, if we delay, they'll pull the account. Lena, if we sign this, we carry their risk. I answered. Who authorized the change at 102? Marcus answered. Corporate. Lena, there's a corporate alias. The metadata traces back to an internal workstation. That last line landed like the sound of a dropped stapler. Conversation sharpened into accusation. The team's tone shifted. Allies sharpened into defenders. Claudia's voice shortened to curt commands. Alex, we have to move. This is above your pay grade. We need to close now. Lena pushed back. You that before without checking. Now we have an email chain and a file stamp. We know where it came from. The air between them was small and hot. I watched Marcus' face for the first time without the layer of charm. His nostrils flared, his eyes narrowed. There was a moment when the room seemed to wait for me. My pen hovered. I saw Marcus's gold signet ring close around his pen like a clasp. I thought of leaving, of walking out and calling compliance. I calculated odds and outcomes in a way that felt like counting coins. My hand shook once and I clenched them. That physical tightening was fear expressed as motion. I swallowed and pushed the pen down. Then Lena reached across the table and laid a printed amendment into Marcus' lap. Her face was steady. Marcus, this shows your workstation as the upload. She did not raise her voice. The entire room rotated toward him. Marcus' throat worked. He smiled a slow half-smile and said, You re-suggesting I would risk my job for a trivial accounting entry. The defense sounded like a script. Claudia's eyes flicked to the doorway as if she expected someone to appear and confirm or deny. Claudia stepped forward and lowered her voice at Lena. Lena, this is reckless. If you push this, you endanger all of us. Lena looked at Claudia and said, Claudia, we are auditors. We follow evidence. Their quick exchange had the rhythm of sparring, 3 short lines back and forth. The team split visibly. Reputation versus procedure. I felt another emotional shift in me, confusion into a brief clarity. I knew which action matched who I said I was inside. Marcus stood and walked to the center of the table, the papers under his palm fanning like a deck. He kept his voice low and even. We will make a note and close tonight. We will follow up in the morning. Alex, please sign so this goes through. There was pressure in his calm, a threat shaped like a promise. He looked at me like he had already built the outcome. I heard the elevator ping outside the glass doors like a small, indifferent bell. The decision snapped forward. I signed. My hand tapped twice on the pen before I pressed the tip to the signature line, a mannerism I always used to stall. My signature shook in a way I could feel, a tremor that felt like giving ground. I pushed the signed page toward Marcus. I signed, I said, and the sentence sounded very small in the room. Marcus's smile returned like a practiced shutter closing. Good. Good. Claudia arranged the folders, closed her designer leather folder with a faint click, and said, Fine work tonight, team. Lena did not move her hands. She stared at the signed line and then at me. I could read a question in her face that asked if I had sold us. Her silence became a pressure of its own. After we left the boardroom, the room emptied in precise turns. People nodded at each other, the corporate version of consolation. Lena lingered at the table and gathered the printed amendment into a small stack. She quietly, "Alex, you know the trace." "You saw it." I shrugged and felt shame as a weight I could measure in my shoulders. I had chosen a path out of fear. That choice had immediate consequences. In the corridor, Marcus stopped me and said, "You made the right move. You will be fine. I'll put a note for your review." He held out a card of reassurance and then did not meet my eyes. I accepted the words like a wrapped item that did not contain what it promised. Lena found me by the elevator and said, "They will bury this." "They always do." Her voice had a hard edge that tested my resolve. I said, "Maybe." "But someone should know." Lena looked at me and said, "Then give them something specific." Her request landed like a plan. Later that night, I sat in my car with the engine ticking and the report folded on the passenger seat. The city felt less like a skyline and more like a list of addresses. I opened the report again and touched the thumbprint smudge on the margin, the one Lena had pointed out. The smudge had a ridge where a fingernail pressed the paper. It was a human detail that made the alteration more than a file error. I slid a folded copy of the amendment into my jacket pocket. A new twist arrived when my phone buzzed. An outgoing message from the audit server showed the report had already been transmitted to a trustee account before Marcus for signatures. The timestamp matched the one in Lena's evidence. The knowledge changed how I understood the meeting. Marcus had not only sought compliance, he might have already pushed the button. That shift altered my sense of culpability into alarm. I spent 20 minutes drafting an email to compliance and then deleted it. I reheated coffee in the office pantry and sat with a pen between my fingers while my thumb rubbed its rhymal edge. The practical side of me listed consequences. Lost job, legal exposure, the child's groceries. The other side, the one Lena had touched, listed obligations. Truth for clients, protection for stakeholders. My chest tightened and then loosened in brief, practical breaths. At dawn, the building cleared and the lights went soft. Lena's desk was empty, and Claudia's chair sat angled as if she had already beamed out of range. I walked back to the boardroom alone and set the signed report in the center of the table. I left the folded copy of the amendment under the report's corner where the morning sun might catch it. I tapped the table twice and stood up straight. That act felt like an attempt at making something honest with my hands. The aftermath came in small, concrete shifts. People returned to their routines with the efficient cruelty of corporate life. Lena was quiet at her station and labeled as difficult in a private message by someone I did not know. Claudia's calendar filled with client calls and a new travel schedule. Marcus moved through his days with the practiced ease of someone who had already decided outcomes. The team's alignment held, the cost had been paid in silence. In the final minutes before I left the office, a junior auditor I barely knew stopped me and said, "Alex, did you see anything strange last night?" He looked at me with honest curiosity, expecting a simple answer. I thought of the signed line and the warm ink. I looked at him and said, "No, everything looked standard." My voice was small and exact. He nodded and walked away. I walked out with the report folded under my arm and the thumbprint smudge still visible at the corner. Downstairs, the security guard waved me through without looking up from his phone. Outside, the city moved on. I stopped on the sidewalk, took the copy of the amendment from my jacket, and set it on top of the trash bin lid for a moment to steady myself. A woman with a courier bag brushed past and did not notice. I did not resolve the larger problem. The audit was closed. The signature was on the line. The report went into a folder that would likely travel exactly where Marcus intended. But I did leave one small act. The folded amendment in my pocket, the print of the thumb smudge pressed into the paper where an investigator could later find it. That action was not a rescue. It was a concession folded toward hope. When I reached my car, my hands smelled of toner and coffee. I set the report on the passenger seat, started the engine, and realized I had to tell someone before the story calcified. I did not know who to trust. I needed time to plan and to find an ally in a room that had already closed its door. I drove away with the signed report between my knees and the folded amendment burning a small, stubborn heat against my thigh. The elevator bell had chimed in the meeting room. Someone else had returned upstairs. I eased the car out of the lot, the city lights passing like numbers on a ledger. The chapter ends with a single physical beat. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded amendment, and held it above the dashboard while the engine idled and the street light cast a thin line across the paper. I pressed the paper flat and felt the thumbprint ridge under my fingertip, a small, undeniable proof. Then the phone on the passenger seat lit with an unknown number, and the screen showed an incoming call labeled only as bored. I watched the caller blink and felt the choice tighten in my chest all over again. The envelope fell out of the crate and hit my shoe with a dry, deliberate sound. Suspicion tightened my chest before I read the single word typed on the tab. Amendment. I pulled the flap. A photocopy of a ledger page slid out, the erasure bright against the ink. The missing line I had signed for the night before was there, white and exact where numbers should have been. I did not sit. I stood in the records basement with fluorescent buzz overhead and files stacked to shoulder height. My name is Alex Mercer. I had stayed late more nights than I could count in the audit department, and I had signed that page because everyone else did. Now the paper told me the concrete reason my mouth had stayed shut. Someone had deliberately removed a line that shifted responsibility. I carried the photocopy upstairs with my hands clamped around it like a tight grip on a rail. The fluorescent light in the stairwell made the photocopy glare. The building smelled of paper and stale coffee. My steps were quick. Each flight felt like an argument I was trying to catch up with. Lina was at the break room table when I pushed the door open. She had her tablet angled, screen bright, a paperclip in her fingers. I slapped the photocopy on the table. Lina, read this. I kept my voice low. Lina looked up, brows tightening. Alex. She smoothed the copy with 2 fingers. That blanked line moves liability to us. This isn't a clerical note. This is deliberate. Her jaw set the way it does before she speaks to a partner or a client. Claudia asked to be cautious yesterday, I said. Marcus pushed the sign off. I signed because everyone else did. I signed because the room fell quiet after he slammed the report on the table. I heard the memory of that slam in my throat and could taste the metal of the conference table edge where my knuckles had pressed. Lina's fingers dug into the paper. We can let this slide, she said. We have to log it. Somebody altered the record to hide executive responsibility. Her voice folded from urgency into calculation. If we escalate, it goes outside the team. If we don't, it's on us. She named the 2 outcomes with a set of short, clear sentences. We compared the photocopy to a digital ledger on her tablet. The magnified print showed a faint white scrape where numbers had been removed. The scrape had straight edges. Someone had used a precise tool. I put my thumb over the corner and felt the paper's texture. The tactile detail made the decision feel less like speculation. Claudia arrived before we had finished annotating the photocopy. She crossed her arms and scanned the paper. Alex, she said, this is bad for the client. She kept her voice controlled. It's worse if we create a public fight. You know how Marcus will frame this. Her gaze flicked to the stairwell, to the corridor. She wore a structured blazer and the thin gold bracelet that caught the light. Claudia, this changes who holds liability. Lina. It rewrites the allocation of responsibility in the audit. We can present a report that conceals that. She flattened the photocopy on the table and tapped the missing column. It moves the risk away from executives. Lina's sentences were quick and direct. She Marcus says name like a statement of fact. Claudia's response was methodical. We negotiate with Marcus. We ask for a correction. We protect the client relationship and our team. We avoid public exposure if possible. She leveled her words at me. Alex, you understand why we can be reckless here, right? The break room chair squeaked when I pushed back. My mouth opened and closed like it was rehearsing a sound. Suspicion had grown into a second root. Doubt about who would stand with me if I made noise. I signed last night because the room. More, I trailed and then finished because Marcus expected a clean report. He slammed the report onto the table and said, sign it now, Alex. Claudia's eyes narrowed. She asked. Her voice had the exact cadence she used when directing a meeting. She glanced at Lena. If Marcus instructed urgency, we can use that to negotiate. Keep the file locked. Let me speak first. Let me contain this. She set a time frame in her tone, as if containment were a task with a deadline. Before I could answer, the glass office door to Marcus Hale's suite clicked open. He stood framed in the glass, hands in his pockets, the cashmere overcoat folded over an armchair behind him. "Alex, Marcus, come to my office." His voice was steady, the baritone that had eased the faux stage presence for years. I followed him. The glass office felt cold despite the heat vent moving air. Marcus gestured to the white leather chair. He kept the photocopy folded under his palm like a prop. "You did the right thing by signing the report last night," he said. "We cannot afford leaks. The market will punish a drawn-out audit. I will protect the team if you cooperate." He leaned forward and tapped a fountain pen on the desk. "You understand the option I am offering. Loyalty now. Stability later." He my name slowly. "Alex," he offered career incentives in one sentence, subtle pressure in the next. He also let a possibility of consequences slip into his mention of instability. Non-cooperation could lead to an extended inquiry. "Marcus." He gestured a slow, controlled motion that could mean longer audits, reputational friction, and regulatory attention. "Are you prepared for that?" I felt my breath tighten. Marcus' office smelled of bergamot and polished wood. The gesture of his signet ring as he set it on the desk created a metallic tap that echoed. I remembered signing the page. My pen had tapped twice before I put it down. I had tapped because, in the meeting after the slam, the team had frozen and the easiest act was to continue that pause. Walking out of Marcus' office, I had two new sensations: resolve and fear. Resolve because the photocopy existed on my desk now. Fear because Marcus had just outlined consequences in plain language. Those two emotions pulled at me in alternating beats. I told Lena everything Marcus had offered and implied. Her reaction was measured. She folded her hands on the table and did not look surprised. "We can escalate anonymously to compliance, Lena. We can submit the photocopy and let the regulator decide if this is material. But if we do that, Marcus will frame us as disloyal and Claudia will try to mediate. We need a plan." Her cadence was steady. She slid a stylus across the tablet and opened a secure portal. I interrupted. "We cannot both hide and do nothing." The doubt that had followed me since the slam hardened into decision. If we let this be buried, the responsibility will stay with us. "I will not let my name sign for that intentionally altered page." I heard my voice tight and clear. Lena nodded once. "Then I'll do it," she said. "I will submit it through the compliance portal under an anonymous header. You and I will have plausible deniability if they ask, but the information goes where it needs to go." She looked at me with a steady, fierce expression. Claudia re-entered the conversation then, hands on her folder. "You can just bypass chain of command, Lena." Her voice picked up its executive edge. "If this goes outside without negotiation, it will ruin the client relationship. It'll ruin contracts. Alex, you must see that." She held my gaze. The tension rose in quick lines. "Claudia, Marcus' instruction is not protection anymore, Lena. It's manipulation to shift blame." Claudia raised an eyebrow. "You reacting rush." Lena, Claudia, Russian reckless. Her statement was clipped. "We will handle this internally unless there is clear evidence of malfeasance that can be fixed." That last phrase carried a threat of process rather than physical harm. There followed a rapid exchange where voices overlapped like gears. "Claudia, Lena, we found a photocopy with an error. That's clear evidence." Lena, Claudia shot back. "We can burn the client now, Alex." Marcus's voice cut in from the doorway when he arrived. "This is a test of competence and loyalty." The words snapped across the room. Marcus had called the urgent team meeting by the afternoon. The large conference room felt full of air conditioning and the weight of 4 offices watching. He framed the meeting like an evaluation. Each of us to explain the sign-off timeline. He set the chair at the head of the table and tapped his fountain pen like a metronome. "We need a unified front, Marcus. I need to see unity from this team." He looked at Claudia, then at me. "Alex, I prefer your cooperation on the proposed addendum. It will clarify our position and limit exposure." He slid a prepared page across the table. The page had language that softened the omission and allocated ambiguity. Claudia took the paper and smoothed it. "This protects the client," she said. "It protects our contracts. We negotiate, we present a corrected internal note. We do not drag the regulator into a rumor on Tuesday morning." Her voice was calm and persuasive. Lena placed the photocopy on top of the addendum and pushed it toward Marcus. "This isn't a negotiation point," she said. "This is an alteration of records. You can ask us to sign something that covers up a deliberate change." Her words were short. She spoke in a rhythm measured by conviction. Marcus' expression did not break, but he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Lena, you are young and principled, which is admirable," he said. "There are costs to principled choices. There are legal channels, and there are market realities. For the company's evaluation for jobs, this stays managed. Alex, what do you say?" He looked at me directly. The room held still while I made a choice out loud. I pushed the sealed photocopy across the table and opened the envelope so everyone could see the stamped amendment. I placed the photocopy where it could not be missed. My hands trembled slightly. I kept my sentences short. "I will not sign the addendum that buries an amendment," I said. "I will not sign for a report that hides a changed line that moves liability away from executives." "Marcus, sign it now, Alex." I signed last night because the room froze, and I regret that silence, the sound of my own name in my confession, felt like a tool that grounded me. Silence followed. Marcus' jaw tightened. Claudia's eyes narrowed as she began to recast the narrative. "Alex," she said with the tone of professional containment, "you made your point. But you understand what you're risking. Marcus will not let this slide without consequence." She stepped closer to the table and lowered her voice. "You put the team at risk." Her hands were steady on the folder. Marcus stood and walked to the glass wall. He spoke slowly, methodically. "There will be an internal inquiry. Security and her will be involved. We will need statements. For now, we secure the documents and get counsel." His words had the procedural finality of an office decision. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The door opened a moment later and a security guard entered with an HR representative trailing behind. Marcus gestured, "Please secure the conference room and collect the documents." He looked at me. "Alex, in the interest of transparency, you will be asked to provide your account." His tone kept the procedural balance between reprimand and investigation. Claudia moved quickly. She began to reframe what had happened in terms the room could accept. "We found a photocopy in records," she said. "We brought it here. We are cooperating. We will comply with the inquiry so the client is not unnecessarily harmed." Her voice tightened on the last word. Lena put her hand on my forearm. The pressure was simple and solid. "You did the right thing, Alex," she said. "We had to force the issue so it could be addressed." Her voice was low. Not for the room, but for me. Marcus watched me while the security officer locked down the conference room. He did not shout. Instead, he offered quiet promises of repercussions. "I can pretend this has no consequences," he said, "but if you cooperate fully with counsel, we will consider appropriate steps. That is process. That is how we protect what remains." The words felt like both balm and threat. The HR rep asked me to step into an adjacent interview room. I carried the photocopy in my hand. My knuckles whitened on the paper. Outside the glass, Claudia's posture shifted as she began to recast the team's choices so that the narrative favored damage control. Marcus watched her as if testing her pliability. Inside the interview room, a woman from HR for a statement. I told the truth, short sentence by short sentence. I described the basement crate discovery. I described Marcus's meeting and the sign-off slam. I described the photocopy and the erasure. Each sentence became a clear, external action. When I left the interview room, Lena was waiting in the corridor. She had her tablet in hand, the anonymous compliance submission still open in the secure portal. "I did it," she said quietly. "It's in." I put the photocopy into the compliance system with an anonymous header and uploaded the metadata. Her face did not register triumph, it registered readiness. My hope slid into a new form. Relief that someone had done the step I could not alone, then dread because the submission would force outside attention. "Do you think they'll trace it?" I asked. Lena met my eyes, possibly. But someone had to start the inquiry. She touched the thin silver wedding band at my finger with a quick, incidental motion. The touch anchored me. We walked back to the conference room and found it reorganized. Papers were gathered, a laptop closed. Claudia approached with measured steps. "We will tell a consistent story," she said. "We will say we found irregularities in archived materials and submitted them through proper channels after internal review. That buys time." She looked directly at Marcus, then at me. Marcus nodded once. "We will follow counsel," he said, "but be aware, the market watches. The board watches. This is not just about the audit team." His eyes slid over us like an inventory check. Security escorted me back toward the archive so I could show where I had found the envelope. I held the sealed amendment like a foreign object. The basement door clanged behind me. Fluorescent light hummed. The crate where the envelope had been was now wrapped in a tamper, evident tape, and 2 security officers took notes. Claudia paused at the basement door. She glanced at me and then at the sealed crate. "If this goes outside, we will be questioned about why we didn't find this sooner," she said. "Expect scrutiny. Expect pressure." Her tone was controlled but real. The photocopy, the sealed amendment, the Haar interview, Linus anonymous upload, those were concrete events that changed how I moved inside the company. The chapter of my silence had ended with noise. The next steps would be investigations, statements, and decisions that might cost jobs and reputations. At the basement steps I stopped. A security guard closed the conference room door behind me. I walked back to the archive room with the sealed amendment in my hand. I kept my shoulders squared. I kept my voice steady when I answered the guard's questions. The elevator ride up felt like a measured interval between the clear act of exposing a change line and the unknown consequences that would follow. The amendment was heavy in my palm. That weight was not abstract. It was a fact I could hold. When the elevator opened, Claudia waited in the corridor. She looked at the sealed amendment and then at me. "We will prepare statements," she said. "We will meet counsel. Be ready." I nodded. My doubt had shifted into readiness, then into a cautious fear, then into defiance, and now into a tempered acceptance of the work ahead. The Haar rep's instructions were procedural. Marcus's promises were conditional. Linus' anonymous file meant the regulator could now ask questions that could not be boxed back in. The last thing I did before the chapter's action paused was fold the sealed envelope into my jacket pocket. A security guard closed the conference room door behind me. I walked back to the archive with the sealed amendment in my hand. Someone across the glass slapped a printed page onto the table and said, "Explain it, Alex." Guilt tightened my throat the way cold coffee tightens a jaw. It sat under my ribs and pushed the words back. I met 8 faces framed by glass and steel before I could pull a breath. The ledger line I had signed off on, or failed to notice, was the center of the room. The central problem was concrete. I had stamped approval on a report missing a ledger entry, and the board wanted to know why. I had not come to the glass-walled review expecting theatrics. I came with a thin leather notebook in my bag, and the habit of correcting other people's calculations for a living. My hands smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon, scented sanitizer. I wore the same muted navy shirt I'd worn the previous day, the one whose cuff frayed where my watch rubbed against the fabric. Pen rolled against the conference table when Marcus pushed the stack toward me. The sound punctured the air. "Alex Mercer," Marcus' voice smooth, "you signed this. Tell us why." He leaned forward, fingers steepled over the document. His baritone grazed glass and chrome and landed solidly in the room. Claudia sat beside him, expression flat, blazer buttoned. Lena stood near the projector with a photocopy in her hand, shoulders squared even though she looked smaller in the light. The committee's faces were neutral, trained. The chairman's pen tapped twice and waited. The accusation was simple and public. Collective silence had become a single man's signature. That was the danger. That was the stake. I started to speak and stopped. The first emotion I voiced was not argument or denial. It was a bodily reaction, my mouth dry, a taste of metal. Guilt moved me to fumble for context instead of for defense. Behind my hesitation I could hear the echo of last night's fluorescent room. Marcus slamming the report, everyone bending to speed. I thought of the envelope I'd found in the basement, that crate, the tab-marked amendment, and the photocopy that had shown the erased ledger line. That memory tightened the knot in my chest and made my voice small. "Why did you sign it, Alex?" the chairman asked. His words were precise, not cruel, but heavy enough. "Because I did what I'd always been taught to do. Check, confirm, sign," I said. I said it to explain routine, but my voice betrayed the doubt under the surface. Guilt shifted to doubt, because everyone else did, saying it felt like returning to an earlier, softer corner of the problem. And it landed like a small appeal rather than a defense. Marcus tilted his head. "Because everyone else did is not an answer, Alex. Procedures matter," Claudia added, quiet. "Procedures also bend under a deadline." Lena's hand set a photocopy on the table. The paper lay between us like a window pane with a crack in it. She slid the copy toward the chairman, and the image of the erased ledger line caught the light in a way the original page hadn't. The room quieted in a new way, not forgiveness but attention. Lena's first action changed the room's tone. She opened with a fact. "This was hidden in a crate in the archive. I found it yesterday." She did not smile. She did not plead. She placed the amendment where the cards could no longer be kept face down. Marcus moved to frame the narrative. He did it with the care of a practiced speaker. Precise vocabulary, a shrug of inevitability, and a version of events that made his choices look calibrated rather than reckless. "This was a procedural lapse, Marcus," a line omitted during reconciliation. "The team signed while closing accounts. There is no malicious intent." He used the phrase "no malicious intent" like a bomb for the room. Claudia's voice came softer but with teeth. "We needed the report out. We had calls with investors tomorrow." I suggested trimming language to keep the audit on schedule. She did not look at Marcus directly, but her admission landed with a small, loud clarity. A forwarded email appeared on the projector, time-stamped and raw. The mood in the room shifted again. Doubt moved toward suspicion. Faces that had been open, waiting, tightened. The chairman's pen hovered. A board member named Ortega frowned and said, "Claudia, did you forward language?" Claudia exhaled, "Yes, for speed." "I didn't expect this." She met Marcus's gaze for a beat too long. Marcus's jaw narrowed the way a drawbridge drops. Marcus tried to corral the room back. "This was not a coordinated attempt at deception," he said. He gestured slowly, the same motion he'd used to calm sales meetings, to steer narratives. "It was a lapse. We correct it. We move on. I will take responsibility for protocol oversight." His tone asked for acceptance. The room resisted offering it. Then Lena produced another document from the photocopy stack. A forwarded email trail showing Marcus's final instruction to close language and a specific mention of "remove the line if it slows us." The timeline on the email matched the night of the sign-off. Silence broke into mutters. The doubt I had felt hardened into fear. Not for my job alone, fear that an institutional habit had metastasized into a choice that someone high up had made. The chairman tapped his pen and said, "This changes things." Marcus held his face with practiced calm. He leaned forward. "Alex," he said directly to me, "you signed because you trusted procedure and authority. You can say that on record." His eyes flicked toward Claudia, as if she were a vote he expected. Claudia's fingers curled around her designer folder. I suggested wording. "I didn't instruct removal of ledger lines." I forwarded Marcus' note because I trusted his call. Her cadence was measured. For a moment she tried to rebuild the circle of defense. Lena's hand tapped the table. I found the amendment. "I can read the erasure. You can all see it." She looked each of us in the eye, but landed longest on mine. "Alex, did you ever see the original?" That question became a pivot. My emotions shifted hard from fear into resolve. I remembered hiding the original ledger copy in the pocket of my coat the night I found it, pressing it against my chest when Claudia left the basement door open and the janitor wheeled past. I had not wanted to create trouble. I had wanted time to decide what to do. The ledger was still in my bag. I felt my hand move before my voice caught up. I set the notebook on the table and opened it to the compartment where I had slipped the ledger page. Paper crinkled. The room leaned in like a ship's crew hearing a bell. "You have the original." The chairman asked. Yes, I said. My voice no longer trembled with guilt alone. It held something like clarity. I kept it. I pushed the paper across the table. Marcus's face went slack in the way a mask drops. He nothing for a beat. Claudius' breath hitched. I read aloud because the ledger needed a voice, a factual spine. This ledger shows the entry at $932,450. The version circulated last night was missing that line. The amendment shows an erasure in the same row. My fingers pointed to the faint white, where ink had been removed. Voices rose. 3, then 4, then a ripple of overlapping lines. Who did this? Why hide it? Was this revenue misstatement? The room became a knot of names and accusations. Marcus tried to seize control. He steered with rhetorical skill. We can correct this with a restatement and an internal memo. The market will understand a procedural error. He paused, then leaned into threat like a thin, polished blade. Or we can let the board find a scapegoat and move on. His wording left little gray. It offered a bargain. Safety for conformity. Claudia's hand shook when she reached for her phone. Marcus, that's a dangerous line. You can tee. Her sentence cut off when the chairman asked for order. Alex, the chairman said later, you'll have to choose whether to sign a statement of cooperation that aligns with the team's version, or to petition for a full external review. Both carry consequences. The room seemed to contract again. Fear nudged at me, fear of the cost of truth. Reputational damage, legal exposure, a cramped future of joblessness while rent and bills waited. Guilt pulled the other way, insisting I could not let manufactured language stand as fact. The emotion shifted, doubt, fear, clarity. I could feel the shift in how my hands moved and how my jaw set. I met Marcus's gaze. You offered protection in exchange for silence last week, I said. I kept the sentence short because the room needed air for its reaction. You mean the company would manage the fallout if no one made this public? Marcus did to deny it. He narrowed his eyes and said, I offered pragmatic counsel. I am not the one who altered records. His voice stayed calm while his fingers tapped the table in small, controlled beats. Claudius' face collapsed in a sudden, private look of surrender. I forwarded his instruction. I asked for faster closure. I didn't alter the ledger myself. Her voice was small among the room's clatter. Lena took a step forward. There's an email from 3 in the morning that instructs edits to the reconciliation language. Marcus signed off on it. She laid a printout on top of the ledger. The timestamp is his. The way she spoke removed a defensive option the room had hoped to keep. The chairman looked from Marcus to Claudia to me. We are seeing a chain of decisions that led to a hidden line. This looks coordinated to the degree that it moved past one person. His words were a gavel without knocking. Marcus' face hardened. He spoke to the chairman. You are misreading intent. I am offering remediation, not escape. I will accept process review. But I will not have my team's careers destroyed over a sloppy reconciliation. He glanced at Claudia, seeking alliance. A board member named Ortega stood. He bluntly, if this reaches regulators with intent attached, we may face fines and leadership changes. We need transparency, or we sacrifice credibility. His sentence landed like a countdown. There was a moment then that felt like the edge of 2 outcomes. The room waited while everyone calculated risk. Claudia swallowed. Marcus's jaw twitched. Lena kept her shoulders square. I felt my lungs working through cold air. I pushed my chair back and stood. The motion made a small scrape on the floor. It sounded theta like in the hush. I will not be the scapegoat, I said. I will not sign a statement that misrepresents what happened. My voice was no longer only about me. It reached toward procedure itself. Marcus's offer tightened into a threat. Alex, people sign statements all the time to preserve continuity. Think of your family, your mortgage. You the team to close language because of investors. Marcus, I shot back. You put speed above reconciliation. You need to own that. The argument opened into a short, sharp exchange. 3 rapid lines. Marcus, we can to sweep this. Of Claudia, you pushed for edits. Marcus, I forwarded what you approved. Claudia. The back and forth was fast and messy in a way that exposed the room's true balance, authority, convenience, and the human decisions that bent rules. Then the chairman said, "Alex, present the original ledger and your statement." Be clear and factual, he did not ask for silence. I handed over the ledger and a short, typed statement I had prepared that morning. The document read plainly, "I refused to endorse the team's narrative and requested a full external review." I had written it in short sentences, each one a fact. Marcus rose, face pale now with a controlled anger. He called security on his phone with one hand while continuing to speak with the other. "This is how we handle risk," he told the chairman, voice taut. "If Mercer insists on this path, we will have to suspend him pending investigation." The threat was procedural, clinical. Security arrived not as menacing silhouettes, but as a uniformed pair who asked the chairman for direction. Phones lit in pockets. The corporate chain initiated. That was the fallout beat the outline had promised. Immediate, operational, and bureaucratic in its cruelty. Someone the word suspension. Another person said, "We will lock copies of all records and preserve the audit trail." A coordinator took notes. I felt the room's attention become businesslike, as if a theater had shifted to factory mode. Claudia stood with me for a moment after board members left the table to take calls. She put her hand on the edge of the table where my ledger lay and said, "Alex, I am sorry." Her apology was not a theatrical collapse but a small, private act. Lena walked over and moved the photocopy back into the folder she brought. "You did the right thing bringing the original forward. You made the evidence real." Her voice did not celebrate, it acknowledged. I felt a complicated relief seep in, relief that clarity had replaced the earlier fog, relief that facts now had room to breathe, and a cost that hummed under it. Fear still lingered. Suspension, investigation, phone calls to lawyers. The emotion folded into a quieter steadiness. I had shifted from guilt to fear to clarity to a guarded peace. Security led me to a small room outside the conference area to write a personal account. Lena followed me and sat opposite with her notepad. "What made you hold on to the original?" I told her the concrete actions that had pushed me. The crate I had searched, the dry sound of the envelope hitting my shoe, the sight of the erasure, and the way the ink pattern looked wrong. I described the exact staccato of the fluorescent tube buzzing when Marcus had slammed the report. I did not offer a speech. I offered specifics. Lena nodded and typed quickly. Claudia came to the door and said, "They will want my email chain. They will ask for my account." She drank water and said, "I'll tell them I forwarded his instruction and that I suggested trimming language for the report. I will not hide it." Her hands were steady when she said it. A few hours later, the chairman called an emergency meeting that would include an external counsel. Marcus was placed on administrative leave pending review. Claudia remained under scrutiny. Her edits were now part of the investigation. Lena was reassigned temporarily to assist counsel. The company's immediate order was preservation and transparency. It was the kind of corporate language that both promises process and delays verdict. Outside the room, the atrium sunlight cut across cool marble. I signed a personal statement refusing complicity and asking for external oversight. My pen tapped twice before I laid it down. The motion matched my early habit of tapping a pen before consenting. I thought of my thin silver wedding band and what it would mean if my income vanished. The worry was real and granular: rent due, a child's school fees, small unpaid bills stacked in a drawer, but I kept my hand moving. Lena folded her notepad and said, "You did this the way I'd have wanted it done. With the evidence first." Her words were not absolution but acknowledgement. Claudia approached, eyes raw. She said, "I'll accept responsibility for my forwarding. I should have read more closely. I will give them everything I have." Her admission was a second external event, a secondary character choosing consequence. Marcus walked past the glass into a corridor flanked by assistants and phones. He did not look at me. For a moment I imagined him composing his next public argument. For a different moment I remembered the night he had told us to close language, the razor, precise phrasing he used to outline risk and reward. The surprise twist in the room had been that the person most comfortable at the margins had left the single ledger line exposed. The fallout continued, Lawyers secured records, interviews. Each new arrival was an external event, another paragraph's worth of motion. The investigation would run its course. Regulators might take months. Internal reputations would be scored in quiet meetings. I felt the relief of right action and the sting of cost. At the end of the day, the conference room emptied. A janitor wheeled a cart down the hall. Lena and I gathered the photocopies and originals and placed them in a secured envelope for counsel. Claudia slipped a folded note onto the table with my name on it. "I'm sorry, Alex," she wrote in careful block letters. There was no flourish. The note fit the ledger's proportions and the day's resolutions. I walked out with Lena beside me. She offered no speeches. She adjusted the strap of her canvas tote and said, "Come with me. We'll get coffee and work the statement together." I did not say yes immediately. I thought of the signed personal statement on my desk, of my wallet, of my son waiting for dinner, and of the ledger's thin, factual proof now in counsel's hands. The elevator doors closed on a corridor that smelled faintly of lemon oil and warm paper. I held the envelope to my chest with both hands, fingers pressed to the folded edge. The emotion that remained was pragmatic, a steady resolution to tell the truth and accept consequence. The final beat of the chapter was concrete, my signature on a personal statement, the security check, and the doors closing as the next procedural steps began. I had refused to be silent. That choice carried cost. It also shifted responsibility back to those who had pushed for speed over verification. The ledger would speak. The review would follow. The company would reckon with the choices that led to the missing line. I did not have answers for everything: how regulators would react, whether my job would survive, how my son would adjust. Those were details to come. For now, the day ended with a signed statement on a clerk's desk and 3 names in motion. Marcus under investigation, Claudia admitting error, and Lena keeping the evidence that made a lie unsustainable. I stepped into the elevator and felt the doors close on the room where we had all been tested. The paper in my hand made the outcome real. Outside on the street, the city moved on with no knowledge of the ledger or its erased line. I walked with Lena, each step a choice toward consequences and away from the safety of silence. The hearing had resolved its immediate conflict. I would not sign the group's convenient version. It had not resolved personal cost. It had, however, closed the specific breach that had begun with a missing line and a midnight sign off. The final move had been mine, and the room would remember it. I slid the signed copy of my short statement into the envelope with the originals and handed it to counsel when they met us in a small, secure conference room. Counsel received the packet without comment, their hands methodical. Lena stood beside me and said, "You did the right thing, Alex," she it the way someone reports fact to fact. It landed somewhere between reassurance and report. I left the building later that afternoon with my bag heavier and my path less certain. The elevator doors closed on consequences. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain on hot pavement. I walked to the subway with Lena a few paces behind, thinking about what would come next. The chapter closed on a simple event. I pushed a signed statement across a desk and walked out. That action set the next procedures in motion and ended the team-sold bargain. The ledger's original line had returned to the record, not erased again. The room's silence had been broken, and with it came consequence and a complicated, practical form of relief.